Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jamie Cashman. I'm the Government Relations Manager here at ISAC, and along with me, the other member of our legislative team is Lucas Bankin, and we're happy that you decided to join us today for our webinar on the 2019 ISAC legislative priorities. And first of all, we'll just kind of outline the policy development process. And that is led by the Legislative Policy Committee, or the LPC. And that, as always, is chaired by the ISAC Second Vice President, who happens to be this year Berlin Matthews, Clay County Supervisor. And we're very pleased that he's with us today here at ISAC as we do this webinar. So if you have any additional questions from Berlin, he'll be happy to address those at the end of the webinar. The LPC consists of 32 members, 2 from each affiliate, and it develops the legislative objectives for ISAC's legislative team to pursue in the upcoming session. And it meets in August and September to develop the legislative platform. And here are the members of the current LPC. Like I said, these consist of 2 members from each of our affiliates. And we certainly can't, Lucas and I certainly can't thank each of these folks enough for all their hard work in developing this package for 2019. Further on the legislative process, the LPC develops the policy statements and the legislative objectives, kind of basically to outline what the differences are between policy statements and objectives. And policy statements are basically overarching statements that provide long-term guidance for issues pertaining to county government, such as local control and local government authority. And then basically these statements are used to provide us guidance as these issues come before the Iowa General Assembly. And next, on legislative objectives, these provide specific problems and solutions for legislators to address. These basically what the ISAC policy team does. It works with affiliates and legislators to actively pursue bills for each of the legislative objectives. And finally, out of all the legislative objectives that we have, we select top priorities. And from those top priorities, these are the things that we take to legislative leadership prior to the session. And so in September, the LPC recommends the priorities to the ISAC membership. And this, for the second year in October, we've done an online voting tool. Like I said, this is the second year. And basically what this is sent out to all the membership, and these are the folks that recommend what the legislative priorities and legislative objectives should be to the ISAC board. In November, the ISAC board ratifies these legislative priorities and then ultimately sets what the top priorities are. And in December, we're doing what we're doing right now with the legislative webinar and the rollout of the top priorities. And then, as a result, for the rest of the year and the start of session, we'll be reaching out to the legislators to talk about what our objectives and priorities are. And we'll also be along with that, meetings with leadership and also with the governor. And for 2019, the 3 top priorities are mental health and disability services, commercial and industrial property tax backfill, water quality, natural resources, and outdoor recreation. And so, mental health and disability services, this certainly hasn't been something that's new to ISAC or to our counties and to our regions. Finding a long-term sustainable funding source to provide mental health services is certainly something that we've been striving for years, even before we went to a regional-based delivery system. And now that we've seen calls for to provide services for complex mental health services and also for children's mental health services, the need to provide sustainable funding is needed now more than ever. And so to address this, we're asking for the legislature to eliminate the regional mental health levy caps that were established in Senate 504 and basically allow the counties to levy what is necessary to fund the region budgetary needs. And we believe that county supervisors can provide the necessary safeguards in terms of guarding the property tax levy dollars that are out there, and certainly would be held accountable for any adjustments to a levy that's out there. Second is to remove the carry forward balance restrictions of 20 and 25%, depending on the size of the region, and to allow for these new and existing programs to be funded, to be not only started, but to be sustained without dramatic changes in property tax. And finally, if the above remedies aren't advanced, we have heard members talk about looking at the concept of an increase in sales tax to fund these programs. But first of all, it must be constitutionally protected, and also second, based on a distribution formula that is equitable for all counties in Iowa.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Lucas Minkin with the Government Relations team. Our second top priority is on the commercial and industrial property tax backfill. As you all are very well aware, in 2013 there was a large property tax relief bill, and as a part of that, along with a legislatively imposed rollback on commercial and industrial property to 90%, the state agreed to what was at the time a unlimited standing appropriation to make up for future lost revenue to local governments. In 2017, that became a limited appropriation, but still a standing appropriation. So action would need to be taken by the legislature to not fully fund that dollar amount to make up for lost revenue. So currently that is set at $152 million, and $29 million of that goes to county governments in Iowa. We are calling for the full funding of the property tax backfill for commercial industrial property, and calling on legislators to reject any legislation that would phase out or dramatically reduce that appropriation. Last year there were several pieces of legislation that would have done just that, and fortunately with your help we were able to get the legislators to back off of that idea and fully fund the backfill. But we do expect that conversation will continue this year, so that is why it is a top priority, and we'll continue to call on the legislature to fully fund the backfill.
Our final priority is on water quality, natural resources, and outdoor recreation. And to address this, we're finally calling for the funding of a 3/8 of a cent of a penny in sales tax to fund the Natural Resources and Outdoor Recreation Trust Fund. As this was passed in 2010, it is yet to be funded. And we believe that this would be an important tool for many reasons, because this fully funds REAP. It provides money for trails, provides money for water quality with on-farm practices, lake restoration, watershed protection, and we believe this can be an incredible economic development tool for counties, as well as providing water quality improvements. And second, maintain the distribution formula for IWIL that's found in Iowa Code, and that was outlined by the Iowa legislature in support of the constitutional amendment, and protected against diversions like they did this year pertaining to REAP. And lastly, pass legislation that would support and encourage public sector entities such as counties to be directly involved in water mitigation. As we've seen, 500-year event floods seem to happen every other year. This is needed now more than ever. And next, I will talk about our legislative objectives. And the first one comes from our auditor's affiliate, pertaining to the absentee ballot commencement date. In previous years, auditors have been able to mail out the absentee ballot out to folks that have requested those as soon as the ballots are available, but no sooner than 40 days could they be mailed out. Also, it would allow, in previous years, a person was able to go to the courthouse 40 days out and be able to vote early. What the legislature did a couple of years ago, calling for voter ID and other election changes, tightened that window from 40 days to 29 days to be able to send out the ballots and to vote in the courthouse. As we've seen, increased voter participation with long lines and added costs for additional election staff, we are calling for that to go back to 40 days. Next, I'll skip over the next one and go to REAP. As we had talked about that before, if IWIL is fully funded, REAP would be fully funded as well at $20 million. Since its inception, unfortunately, it hasn't been fully funded, but this was something above and beyond IWIL, that conservation wanted to make sure that REAP was that important. That would be an objective above and beyond the priority we have with IWIL. And next comes from the Sheriffs and Deputies Association. As we have seen a rise in Iowa of dangerously excessive speeding, which caused an increase in the amount of deaths, the sheriffs and deputies, as well as ISAC, are calling for whoever is or caused the intentional death of someone while going over 25 miles an hour over the posted speed limit would be convicted of a Class C felony. And next, I will turn it over to Lucas.
County infractions is a returning objective from our zoning affiliate and deals with when a county has to go and remedy a zoning violation and incurs a cost to do so. And in the process of trying to recoup from the property owner, currently they would go get a judgment and a lien would be placed on the property. So it could be many years down the road before that lien would get cleared up when the property is transferred. So we're calling on the legislature to change this collection process, and rather than a lien on the property, it would be collected as an assessment and collected at the same time as property taxes in order for the county to collect much quicker and for the property taxpayers to be relieved of that cost that they are currently subsidizing and covering for what could be many years. Next, we have a returning objective from the engineers on secondary roads. We are continuing to call for the cap on time 21 to be maintained at $225 million, and any additional revenue that would go into that fund would be distributed with the road use tax fund formula. We're also calling for the exploration of a couple of fees. First, the excise sales tax on being applied to dyed fuels, and also looking at certain development fees, permit fees, and others for those industries that have a disproportionate impact on secondary road system, such as CAFOs, large hydraulic fracking operations, biodiesel plants, and other industries that take a disproportionate toll on our roads. And finally, our final objective is on weight limits on secondary roads. There was legislation late last session dealing with the weight limits for construction vehicles on the secondary road system and allowing them to use the weight restrictions meant for the primary highway system. Obviously, our secondary roads and bridges are not designed for those increased weights, and so as a result, it is estimated that there would need to be inspections and most likely weight restriction postings on about 4,000 bridges. So this would be quite an undertaking for our county engineers and a large unfunded mandate. It could also negatively affect other industries that would then be restricted in the weight that their vehicles could have, even though it might have a not as large impact as the condensed construction vehicles, particularly perhaps semi-trailers or ag vehicles that would be spread out over more axles and not have the same impact, but they would be subject to the new weight restrictions. So we are calling for repeal of this language from last year and look to keep the weight limits for secondary roads in place or back to where they were before.
And next we'll talk about tracking tools.
Well, we have a couple of different tools that you should be aware of. First, the Iowa legislature on their website has a tracking tool that you can go look up legislation, be able to read the bills. You can see what groups are registered how. You can also see the bill history to see where it's at in the process, if it's moving through subcommittee, if it has passed one chamber or the other, and the progress that it has made. So simply go to the Iowa Legislature website and then click on the legislation tab, and you'll have plenty of options there on how to track the individual pieces of legislation.
I'll also add, you can go on there for additional links to committees, specific committees, links to legislators and their email addresses, and also you can track chamber debate while the legislature is in session in both the House and the Senate. And next on the ISAC legislative tracking tool.
On our website, you can go to our tracking tool either by typing in the address that you can see on your screen, or by going to iowacounties.org and clicking on the legislative tab and going to Build Tracker. This is quite a good tool both for keeping track of all the legislation that is going on, but then more specifically to the legislation that might affect your affiliate. So one of our favorite components of the tool is being able to sort by affiliate, by which chamber it's in. You can also sort by if ISAC is registered for, against, or undecided. So using the tabs across the top to sort is a very handy tool. We list all pieces of legislation that are introduced, but you'll be able to see that if we're not registered on the bill, if it does not apply to county government, we don't really keep track of what's going on with those pieces of legislation. But for those that would have an impact that we are registered on, we keep track throughout the session on the progress that has been made, where it's at in the process. As I said before, if it's through subcommittee, through committee, or has actually been voted on by one chamber or the other, or both, and might be just waiting for the governor's signature. So you can see as you go across, all of that information is handy. And again, just by clicking on the top tabs, you can sort and filter for your convenience as well.
All right, and lastly, we're encouraging everyone to get involved in the process. And you can do that in many ways. And certainly contacting your legislature is something incredibly important for advocacy for counties. And I encourage you to attend County Day at the Capitol, which will be held in conjunction with our spring conference. And County Day at the Capitol is March 13th of this year. Certainly calling your legislators while they're back in their districts, but also while they're at their capital is very important. Then also email and clearly state your subject in the subject line, as the legislators receive many, many emails throughout the course of the session. Also through letters, and also the forums. Typically the legislative schedule during the week wraps up usually around Thursday to allow for legislators to go back to their districts to have community forums on Friday and Saturday. And so certainly attend those and give your legislators feedback on issues that are important to counties. And certainly feedback is certainly something that's incredibly important to Lucas and I. We put out an ISAC legislative update that comes out every Friday during session, outlining legislation that's incredibly important to counties. And as a part of that, there's a legislative comment form to provide feedback. And Lucas and I are happy to get back with you with any comments that you have in regard to anything happening during session. And so I'll also outline a few other things that are going to be happening coming up. We'll have the new County Officer School on January 16th through the 17th. So please go on the ISAC website to register for that. And that will be held at the West Des Moines Sheridan. And then also for county supervisors, the statewide supervisors meeting will be held on Thursday, January 31st at the Embassy Suites downtown here in Des Moines. And you can also go on ISAC's website to register for that as well. So with that, here is Lucas and my contact information, and please feel free to reach out to us at any time. And with that, we'll see if there's any questions.
Yes, we had someone say that there's rumors that REAP will be eliminated in 2021. Do you know if this is true?
Right now, REAP is scheduled to sunset in 2021, and so that, as a part of that legislative objective pertaining to REAP, we are encouraging for that to be extended another 10 years to 2031. So if action isn't taken prior to 2021, then REAP would expire, but we'll be pushing for an extension of at least 10 years, if not more.
Thank you. And then we had a question on weight limits on grain semis. It stated that they tear up their gravel roads.
Yes, that's absolutely true, and the reason that I chose to focus on that is for the bridges in particular, because those are, the weight is spread out over more axles. They don't have the same impact on bridges as the construction vehicles that were in question in the legislation that we're hoping to go back on. So currently we don't have anything in the works to deal with ag vehicles on the secondary road system. We're more focused at this point on getting rid of the language on construction vehicles.
Perfect. Well, there's no more questions right now, but as Jamie stated, if you have any in the future, please feel free to reach out to them. And this presentation will be recorded and set on the ISAC website. So unless Jamie and Lucas have anything else, we'll go ahead and conclude.
Well, thanks everyone, and have a Merry Christmas.